حفظ القيادة السورية على أرواح مواطنينا وأمن بلدنا.
Assad does not have significant military capability.
إذا قتلونا مع التابعين نروح الفتنة.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons says Syria has completed the handover of its chemical arsenal. Lebanese President Michel Sleiman reiterates his call for the formation of a cabinet and for the return to dialogue. And at least 9 people are killed following a gun battle inside the shopping center in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi. President Michel Sleiman says Lebanon's political crisis and the conflicts in the region should jolt politicians into joining hands to form a new government and return to dialogue. On the occasion of International Peace Day, Sleiman says Lebanese leaders should be aware of the concept of instability in their country and join efforts to form a government and return to the national dialogue to resolve the country's problems. He said such efforts will help Lebanon avoid the repercussions of the regional crisis. Sleiman reiterates that the UN Security Council should work to resolve crises and conflicts through dialogue and peaceful measures. He says he hopes for peace in the world and for strong efforts by the international community to achieve stability away from wars and conflicts. Prime Minister-designate Tamam Salam says he hopes Lebanon's political parties will not hinder his efforts to form a cabinet. Following talks with President Michel Sleiman at Babda Palace, Salam says there is pressure and insistence by everyone to form a new cabinet, despite circumstances preventing him from accomplishing his task. Those circumstances include tensions among rival parties, amongst other issues, he says. However, he says he will not give up his mission and will continue to confront all obstacles. He says he hopes to see a lineup before Sleiman's trip to New York City. The president will follow up the issue of the cabinet formation after his return. Interior Minister Marwan Sharbil says security forces will call up 2,000 reserve personnel so that the ISF can deploy in the Beirut area of Dahieh, where Hezbollah erected several checkpoints following a deadly explosion which targeted the area in August. Sharbil says the deployment will start on Monday afternoon so that it can begin its mission at the same evening. The Interior Minister also reiterates his rejection of self-security measures taken by Hezbollah and reveals that the parties in Dahieh have voiced their relief over the planned security measures that the ISF will take in the area. Education Minister Hassan Diab has extended the registration period for Lebanese and foreign students in public schools for the 2013-2014 academic calendar. The National News Agency says the registration period is extended until October the 10th for new and returning Lebanese pupils, as well as returning Syrian students. With regard to Syrian students seeking to register for the first time for the 2013-2014 academic calendar, Diab called on schools to provide a list of the names of the pupils to regional heads of education who will take the required measures in accordance with available capacity. Last year, only 30,000 Syrian children were enrolled in public schools. Syria says it has completed the handover of an inventory of its chemical arsenal by a Saturday deadline laid out in a U.S.-Russian disarmament plan. This is according to the Hague-based Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which confirms it has received the expected disclosure from the Syrian government regarding its chemical weapons program. The watchdog says the Technical Secretariat is currently reviewing the information received. The OPCW has postponed a meeting of its Executive Council set for Sunday, which had been due to discuss how to dismantle Syria's chemical weapons program. On another note, Russia says it may change its position on Syria if it sees any cheating on the part of the regime. Syria's opposition National Coalition has rejected an Iranian offer to broker talks with the regime, saying the bid was not serious and calling Tehran part of the problem. The comments come after Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says on Thursday that his government was willing to facilitate dialogue between the Syrian government and opposition fighters. The Syrian opposition says it was skeptical that Iran, a staunch ally of President Bashar al-Assad, could broker talks. They added it would be more useful if the Iranian leadership withdrew its military experts and fighters from Syrian territory. The Syrian opposition has long alleged that Iran has sent military personnel to help Assad's forces in their fight against the rebels. 15 people have been killed by Syrian troops. This is for news on the ground, backed by pro-regime militia in the central province of Hama. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says pro-regime forces carried out a massacre using guns and knives to kill residents of Sheikh Hadid village. 10 other people were wounded in the incident. The observatory says there had been clashes between rebels and regime forces in the village, and it was not clear whether all the men killed were civilians. It says rebel forces managed to take control of the nearby village of Jelma. The UN Children Agency says Syrian refugees in Lebanon are becoming increasingly reliant on child labor to earn money for families now desperate to maintain basic necessities. UNICEF Director Maria Kalivis is urging the UN and its partners to find a solution for the children and suggests providing them with continued learning under tents.
It is a growing problem. Families are poor and are also destitute after 2.5 years of war. And many, as you know, get uprooted and leave with very little. So it's very important, and often, in order to continue living, they have a lot of expenses that they incur. And as a result, you know, kids have to go to work. There are at least 400,000 kids that are of school age, and the public schools can only accept 100,000 kids. This is the maximum place they have, and it may be even less, because every year we don't know if there will be sufficient places for the amount of Syrian refugees. So for the time being, there are some 300,000 refugees without a place in a school. And therefore, it is up to UNICEF and the partners and other partners to really find solution for these kids. And the solution is also there to provide them with continued learning under tents, which I understood this morning, they are tents, we cannot be permanent tents. So whereas in other camps you have a permanent tent that safeguards the materials, safeguards the desks, safeguards all the things that kids need for a continued learning. These are tents that are removed every night and set up again in the morning.
And still to come in our program, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is stressing on education for peace on International Peace Day. Stay tuned for his message after the break. Welcome back. Iraq's Kurds have voted in the first election in 4 years as their autonomous region grapples with disputes with Baghdad while fellow Kurds fight bloody battles in neighboring Syria. The election for the region's parliament comes as the turmoil rolling in the Middle East has raised renewed questions about the political future of the Kurdish nation as a whole. Sources say the new parliament is likely to push for greater autonomy from Baghdad. The Kurds are spread across a number of neighboring states where they have long faced hostile governments, but have found increasing space to pursue their aspirations to run their own affairs. Moving on to Kenya, at least 9 people have been killed following a gun battle inside a shopping center in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi. Gunfire is ongoing and armed police are at the Westgate Center in the Westlands district, one of the city's most exclusive shopping malls. The gunmen are reported to be carrying assault rifles and wearing combat fatigues. Witnesses say the attackers threw grenades into the building at about midday local time. At least 2 dozens were wounded, were wheeled out on stretchers and shopping trolleys, and many of the victims had multiple light wounds. And now for news around the world in brief. Pakistan has released former Afghan Taliban second-in-command Mullah Abdullah Ghani Baradar from prison, an effort aimed at bringing peace to Afghanistan. The U.S. and Afghanistan have long pressed Islamabad to free Baradar, a figure they believe could tempt moderate Taliban leaders to come to the negotiating table as U.S.-led troops prepare to leave Afghanistan at the end of next year. Super Typhoon Usagi, the most powerful storm of the year, has brought torrential rain and strong winds to the Philippines and Taiwan, uprooting trees and knocking out power as it barreled towards Hong Kong. Usagi battered across the north of the Philippines through the early hours of this morning with gusts up to 250 kilometers per hour. BlackBerry says it expects to report a huge quarterly operating loss next week and that it will cut more than a third of its global workforce. The company, which has struggled to claw back market share from the likes of Apple Incorporate's iPhone and Samsung's Electronics Galaxy phones, says it expects to report a net operating loss of between $950 million to $995 million in the quarter end August 31st due to write-downs and other factors. Today is the International Day of Peace, and this year UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is stressing on education for peace. In his message posted on YouTube videos, Ban says education is vital for fostering global citizenship and building peaceful societies, in his words.
The International Day of Peace is a time for reflection, a day when we reiterate our belief in nonviolence and call for a global ceasefire. We ask people everywhere to observe a minute of silence at noon local time to honor those killed in conflict and the survivors who live with daily trauma and pain. This year, we are highlighting education for peace. Education is vital for fostering global citizenship and building peaceful societies. When Malala Yousafzai came to the United Nations in June, she said, I quote, "One teacher, one book, one pen can change the world," end of quote. These are our most powerful weapons. That is why I launched the Global Education First initiative. On this International Day of Peace, let us pledge to teach our children the value of tolerance and mutual respect. Let us invest in the schools and teachers that will build a fair and inclusive world that embraces diversity. Let us fight for peace and defend it with all our might.
What do you think the first step to achieving peace is? Here are a few answers to this question.
The first step for peace is realizing the problem.
It's hard because you know that people are different, but sometimes it's hard to understand someone else's differences.
To get an alignment between people and trust each other, believe that peace is doable. It's not something that we dreamed of. We have dreamed of a lot, but now it's time to bring this dream to reality.
I think the first step to understand our history and what can we do. We have to believe that, you know, we have the power to make a change in the world.
The first step to peace is acknowledgement. And that means acknowledging that there is a problem, acknowledging that you do have power to change it.
The first step is a personal practice of peace.
Achieving peace is just the internal thing. You know, you got to be happy internally, or else you can't do anything for anybody else.
The first step was to today, you know, to have to watch the International Day of Peace just continue to grow.
I just thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if instead of fighting over peace, we could have some day that was dedicated just to peace, where all humanity would realize that we are all interconnected on this planet.
Now, this definitely is a question worth reflecting on. And on that note, we end our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our headlines. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons says Syria has completed the handover of its chemical arsenal. Lebanese President Michel Sleiman reiterates his call for the formation of a cabinet and for the return to dialogue. And finally, at least 9 people are killed following a gun battle inside a shopping center in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi. That's it from me and the news team here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tanim, wishing you all a very peaceful weekend.
القيادة السورية على أرواح مواطنينا وأمن بلدنا.
Assad does not have significant military capability.